No, I had promised I would talk about this, and I frankly forgot. I had so much good news. All right. Well, this is not under the category of good news in my view, but I guess it depends on your point of view. So, I'm going to reiterate some comments that I made on the radio today. Some people may have had an opportunity to hear it. I attended a meeting last Friday with legal counsel, as well as with three members of our council, Councilmember Brimmer, Councilmember Robb, and Councilmember Buckner. And we were presented at that time by Lyle Jacobson, who's a representative of the Treasurer's Office, State Treasurer's Office, and Tim Setto, who's the chair of the PFD board, and their counsel, Mr. Fraley, as well as by the our three state legislators, Representatives Armstrong and Condata and Senator Parlett, were all in that meeting, and they presented to us a piece of proposed legislation written primarily by the Treasurer's Office and sponsored by our three North Central Washington legislators. That is a bill that we've had to then analyze since that time. They did give us an overview of what they thought it accomplished. The first thing out of their mouth, as I recall, was that they had decided that to draft this bill in such a fashion that it would supersede all previous agreements between the 8 jurisdictions, or the 9 jurisdictions involved in the formation of the Public Facilities District, but specifically the provision in the agreement that prevented a Public Facilities District from exercising taxing authority to impose, with a vote of the people, a additional sales tax on the people in the region to support that center. And they indicated that the salient portion, at least as I got it, the salient portion of the legislation was that at the end of the day, if the local jurisdiction didn't reach a agreement or arrangement of some kind over the course of the period that this legislation provides for, that the current PFD board would have the ability to impose that tax councilmatically. And by that I mean without the necessity of going out for a public vote, and with just a vote of their membership. There were some other provisions of this legislation that I don't think I'll take the time to go into tonight. Some of them are a little concerning, but I want to kind of back up at this point to 2005 and 2006 and into 2007. There was a time, I believe it was toward the latter part of 2005, maybe 2006. This is all kind of getting jumbled up in my head to some degree. I looked at the minutes here a month or two ago. When we were presented this proposal for the Town Toyota Center by representatives of the then proposed Public Facilities District Board. I remember Linda Haglund was with them, and there was a group that was here to present to the council members. Some of you will remember that presentation. There was a motion made after the presentation, but during the presentation they emphasized the fact that they were not seeking any financial contribution toward the center except for recapture of sales tax in these other 8 jurisdictions that would go to help defray the costs of construction and maintenance for this facility, and that they would guarantee as part of the formation documents that their taxing authority would never be used to impose additional sales taxation on the other 8 jurisdictions and the residents of those jurisdictions without the consent of all those 8 jurisdictions to that move. That was analyzed by every legal representative of each one of those 8 jurisdictions. And each one of the 8 jurisdictions received legal advice to the extent that that was would be a binding commitment once it was signed. And that was represented here in this council chambers. And as a result, and in reliance on that, this council voted to enter into an interlocal agreement and become a member of the Public Facilities District, an interlocal agreement which would form the Public Facilities District, and then a membership in it as a founding member. And that's where we went from there. This particular legislation, as I already indicated, voids those contracts and agreements. And I expressed myself on KPQ that I question whether or not the legislature has the power to delegate to a non-elected body such as a PFD to impose a tax. In fact, I question whether the legislature has the ability to unilaterally impose a tax on any municipality when it's not imposing a tax generally on the rest of the state in order to solve a crisis or for any other purpose. But we were assured, although there were no specifics provided at the meeting, that they had done their legal research and that their act was constitutional. And so we left the meeting with the idea that between now, or between then, last Friday, and December 1st, which is the default deadline for the Town Toyota Center, and specifically beginning on November 28th, which is when the new special session of the legislature convenes, that they would be presenting this bill, as I just indicated, to the legislature in special session for immediate consideration. I believe before they get down to business on pretty much anything else in Olympia. And they had their hope was that this bill will pass, and as a result the State Treasurer's Office will use some funds that are not part of the general fund of the state of Washington, but are specialty funds kept by, sales tax funds kept by the Treasurer's Office to pay the bondholders on the entire $42 million obligation that is currently outstanding. And that would leave the PFD board with the ability, if they chose to simply impose the 2% tax on the region in order to provide a source of revenue to pay back the state. This legislation actually requires a payback of that $42 million in 10 years' time, significantly less than what you would have on a long-term bond. And it provides some very stiff penalties in terms of outcome to the various jurisdictions if that money is not paid back by the end of that 10-year period. In fact, if the legislation provides for a 13-month period from the time that it goes into effect on December 1st until the end of 2012, during which the jurisdictions would be allowed to get together and form a plan for repayment of these funds. On the other hand, if they do not reach an agreement, then the state would step in and collect the funds for collection directly from the jurisdictions out of our sales tax revenue. And we've done some figuring, or legal counsel has, and it looks as though that would mean an additional, well, our share of that in East Wenatchee would be 18% of the total. This is per capita according to population, and our share would be 18% of a payment of about $4.8 million a year that would occur to pay that back in 10 years. if you do the math, that comes up a little short of $900,000 a year hit on the budget of East Wenatchee. As a carrot, I guess you could call it that, the legislation provides that we could individually impose a 2% tax in our jurisdiction by councilmatic action. 0.2%, I'm sorry. So just for, I think this is pretty clear, but if we have an 8% tax now, it'd be 8.2 on everything that's subject to a sales tax. We could impose that in order to defray the city's, or to raise the revenue, I guess, to pay the $900,000 a year. And there's other options. For example, there's negotiations that could occur during that 13-month period so that Wenatchee would shoulder the lion's share of this, and maybe the taxation that we would put out to our own citizens would be less than 0.2. But that would be subject to negotiation. My problem with this going in was that once you give the PFD, the board, the power to unilaterally impose a 2%, I questioned Wenatchee's incentive to want to engage in negotiations to take on the lion's share of the debt. And then there's one more thing that gives me pause about this, and that is that when we formed the Public Facilities District as a joint operation under these interlocal agreements, we did not care, at least I should say I didn't care, who sat on the PFD board, because the total obligation was being borne by the City of Wenatchee. The City of Wenatchee at that time proposed that the board be an appointed board, and the proposal was that there would be 3 members on that board appointed by jurisdictions, being Douglas County, Chelan County, and East Wenatchee, and that Wenatchee have the power to appoint 4 members to that board, which they have done. Well, right now they have 3, and they have an open position. So, but the board would, if fully complemented, would be 4 representatives from Wenatchee and 1 representative from each of the 3 major jurisdictions. The other jurisdictions, Iniat, Rock Island, Chelan, Waterville, Leavenworth, 5 jurisdictions are not represented on that board at all. And I don't find that legislation that now under the new plan, if you will, the new direction that is established by, if it would be established by this bill, we would have a board that is that consists of primarily people that serve the interests of the City of Wenatchee, making a decision to tax the whole region, as opposed to equal representation on that board, which we probably would have insisted on if we'd have gone into the deal at all, back when, if we'd have known that this power to tax would exist at the time of formation. So those are some of the concerns. Now, you know, from a lot of these are cons, but there are a couple pros. One of the pros is that there would be the elimination of the possibility of a large, and I mean large, lawsuit as of December 1st upon default. There are those in the jurisdictions who believe that if the default does occur, that there's no jurisdiction that will be safe from litigation over the outcome from the bondholders, and that the cost of that litigation would be, in the minds of some, enormous. And so the interest of getting these bondholders paid, regardless of what happens in the ensuing year and how we work it out, some consider paramount. And that is a major consideration. So I discussed some of this on the radio this morning, and I think I've given it to you about as straight as I can remember it. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, legal counsel, or any of the people who attended. Councilmember Bremer?
At the meeting, you asked for some legal opinions. Did they ever get that to Devin?
No. I did get a call from Lyle Jacobson the next day. No, Monday, yesterday morning. I spoke to he and Senator Parlett. I expressed to Senator Parlett first some of the concerns that I just expressed here, and then he called me. She gave him my number. I talked to him. I told him mainly my concerns about the makeup of the board, and my concern about how, if this passes in its current stage, how can you justify having a lay board like this that does not consist of elected officials have the power to tax, and especially when the legislature itself, in my mind, it's questionable whether they have the power to tax, and which they could delegate to them in this manner. And I don't know the answers to those questions, but he told me that at the time that he had his legal people working on it and that they were going to get something to me. Well, I haven't seen anything. He also indicated that the bill was still in flux to some degree, and that they would take into consideration my concerns about the makeup of the board, so that there might be potentially some revision of it.
Which is in direct contradiction to what he told me at that meeting.
Yes, I know. And I'm not sure how to take any of that, to be honest with you. I'm just reporting what I know, because I think this is a big enough deal. I want you all to be fully informed and not miss out on any of the information that comes into my possession. Councilmember Hendricks.
Two small questions. Since basically it looks like they've taken over and we have no listen to us, and they lied to us. Two questions. Is, if they do sue us, is our insurance pool cover that?
No.
And next question, since one of the agreements to drop out was if the thing changed, it's definitely changed. What would be the advantage of us dropping out, period? And let them, since they don't ask for our opinion anyway.
This legislation does not give us an option to drop out.
But the original contract did.
The original contract is going to be superseded by this legislation if, in fact, the legislation passes. So what you're really questioning, as am I, is whether the legislation is legal or constitutional, which, I'm not prepared to give you an answer on that either. But I can raise some questions about it, but I can't provide any solid answers on that issue. But I can tell you that if this legislation passes, we don't have the option of simply withdrawing from the situation. We'll be looking at exactly what I just told you.
One last question.
Yes.
Then basically we should urge all our citizens to contact legislators. What you think? I personally think.
Well, I just tried to give you the two schools of thoughts on that. One is we could shake our fists and get really adamant about how this is a overbearing, heavy-handed bait and switch. You could talk about all kinds of things. But on the other hand, if this legislation passes, we're going to dodge a major lawsuit. And then the question will become, can we work some of these things out, other issues out in the mix, as we move into 2012. So there's two schools of thought as to whether you should try to prevent this legislation from passing. Certainly there are aspects of it that I've already explained that are questionable, but the idea of getting those bondholders paid and avoiding that large or enormous lawsuit is pretty compelling too. So I don't know. Having said that, I'll tell you that Devin Polson, our city attorney, and I have had our heads together on this continuously, not continually, but continuously, since Friday, and we have, I authorized him today to send a letter to every member of the legislature, just outlining our concerns with some of these issues that I talked about to you tonight.
The 3 legislators?
No,
Or all of them?
Everybody.
Okay.
we sent it to
Thank you.
every legislator in the state legislature.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
I didn't wait for this council meeting to do that, and primarily because I saw an urgency given the timing of all this. If that was in excess of my powers, I don't think it was, but if it was, you'll just have to accept that explanation, because that's what I did.
Somebody brought up to me, this is making some assumptions if it passed or if it comes to occur. But I thought the thought process was good, and that's that if this comes to pass and it's being paid for, this person wanted me to bring up the fact that the city of Wenatchee, or none of the cities, should have the power to go in afterwards and sweep money out of that, because it's got to have money to repair the roofs, to do all the other things. So hopefully somebody will address that as we go forward too.
Well, the legislation dedicates all the funds that are collected for repayment of the debt, and I think the legislation does not authorize any collections. Well, I take it back. Since they authorize us to collect a 2% tax and they don't tell us how long that tax could exist, presumably we could do an appropriation under that bill longer than it takes to pay it back. But I think their anticipation was that it would simply last long enough to pay the debt.
They said there was a sunset clause.
Yeah, there's a sunset clause in terms of the bill's imposition on us.
Okay.
But the bill also authorizes the jurisdictions to issue this 2% tax, and I don't think it limits that tax to the duration of the bond, does it?
I know the council-matic sales tax increase expires when the debt is paid off. To go back and look if our authority to oppose that additional layer expires. I don't think it does.
Yeah, I didn't see
I'd
it.
have to go back and look.
But that would be our decision, of course, and we could keep any additional burden from going on our citizens by sunsetting it ourselves if we chose to do that. So, all right.
He does.
Just in regards to government adjustments,
Sure.
what happens to operational
This bill does not affect or impose any obligation on the Public Facilities District with respect to their operational revenue, if that's what you're asking. Yes, it is now. So I don't see why it would change. Yeah. But I don't think the bill, and again, this is fairly hastily drawn legislation, which is what concerns me. But I don't think the legislation contemplates or discusses at all the use of this money beyond the repayment of the debt to the state. And I think its intent in sunsetting it was that it not be used for anything else. So,
Mayor, to answer Skip's question, somebody from the inside told me that Wenatchee has used some of that money to fund their attorneys and do some other things as they go through this thing. So I have no idea if that's true or not, but somebody who should know told me that's already occurred. And how much? I have no idea. I just want to make sure it doesn't happen in the future.
yeah, I mean,
Big deal.
like I said before, we didn't care. Now we do. So, all right. If there's no more questions, I spent quite a while.